Welcome to Common Cup. I'm Jim Gear. Common Cup is a program about projects, item of interest, and very special people in our area. And today I have a special guest, Benita Esposito, and she is a licensed professional counselor and has been offering services in our area for some time now. Tell us a little bit about your background and your work.
All right. Well, I am a licensed professional counselor, and I have a master's degree in clinical psychology that I received from Illinois State University back in the 70s. So I've been doing this a really long time.
Right. And let me ask you a little bit more about your background and the kind of things that you focus on. And we're going to focus on some specific things today. But in generally, what are some things that in your counseling services that you offer?
I work with primarily adults.
Okay.
And I specialize in relationships, so all forms of relationships, particularly marriage counseling, couples counseling, premarital counseling, and also people who are dating or the singles who have been through a really rough patch with relationships and they want to prepare themselves to learn more about how they need to be, what they need to learn, the skills that they need to be able to use when they go into their next relationship.
Right. One other thing I'd like to ask you about, you discussed some of your methods, but in your presentation, what is some unique aspects of your work?
I have been studying intensely Dr. John Gottman's work.
Okay.
And he wrote a book called 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work.
Okay.
And this encapsulates his work that he has been doing over 40 years. And he brought over 3,000 couples into his laboratory at University of Washington, Seattle.
Yes.
And he studied them over time. We call it longitudinal studies. And his one question was, what do people do who report themselves to be happily married over time?
Yes.
And what do couples do and how do they be and what goes on in their bodies who report themselves to be unhappily married and they break up, or they stay married and they're really miserable?
Yes. And this is under the category of disasters of marriage.
Yes.
Okay.
He wanted to know what makes masters of marriage and what makes disasters of marriage.
Okay.
So we could just have the raw data. We can learn about this, and we can decide if we want to apply the skills or not. So I'm here to share with the public in an educational format John Gottman's work. It's not my work.
I understand.
It's what John Gottman found over these 40 years of research.
Well, you know the time we have is going to be pretty short.
Yeah.
So I would like you to just have the opportunity now to pursue this.
Okay.
And we'll listen and we'll learn, and then we'll be challenged to follow up on these things that you're wanting to help us with. Would you just present then the concept?
Sure. Well, first of all, just to let you know the current statistics,
Okay.
43% of marriages are ending in divorce.
Yes.
So the divorce rate has actually gone down from about 50%.
Yes.
But what's interesting about that is that younger people are living together instead of getting married, and that's part of the reason that the divorce rate is going down.
Right.
But it's also extremely interesting
Okay.
that the divorce rate is rising in people in their later 50s and 60s and 70s. So the baby boomers, of which I am a part of, started this divorce craze and are continuing it. So after the kids leave home and women now have greater sources of their own income, they're unhappily married, they're going, I don't want to stick around for this. So that, divorce causes so much pain and agony.
Yes.
I mean, at the actual divorce, but leading up to it, afterwards, it creates major chaos in our society.
And what you carry into the next
Yes, right.
relationship.
When
Yes.
you don't end a relationship in a healthy way, you carry the residual of that wounding, and you most of the time project it onto your next partner. So getting a next partner is not usually the answer. In fact, we know that second and third time marriages have a higher divorce rate than first time marriages.
Right.
So that's a big, I mean, I know I've had my struggles with relationships. It's not easy. There are very teachable skills. So
Yes.
let's launch into, just for today, talk about what creates disasters of marriage. And I hope you'll have me back on the program
We will.
again and again. We'll talk about how to make it better.
Okay.
So John Gottman came up with this term he calls the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Okay.
Now, you know what the apocalypse
I know
is,
what
right?
yes. But how is that applied in this segment?
So, if you do these 4 things that I'm going to tell you about that are mentioned in this book, 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work,
Yes.
it's very likely to lead to the death of your marriage. So, the first one is criticism. Now,
Okay.
we often hear about constructive criticism.
Yes.
Well, John Gottman says, for the most part, criticism isn't helpful, even when we're trying to be helpful.
Right.
You know, like, honey, let me point out this flaw that you have, and if you would just stop doing that, you would be such a better person. Well, John Gottman doesn't think that that's usually very well received.
It's not very well received in other settings either, you know.
Right. And I think, that's a good point. The 4 horsemen that we're going to talk about in marriages that destroy marriages, they destroy about every relationship, no matter what kind of relationship it is. So we can generalize from this.
Right.
So criticism, according to John Gottman, is not just complaining about a behavior that's disturbing to us.
Right.
It's attacking the person's character. So it would be like, it wouldn't be just complaining about that you leave your socks and clothes on the floor and you don't pick them up. That would be describing actual behavior. But it would be, you are such a slob, you never think about anybody else. That's attacking character. You always do that. You never do this. And we start generalizing. So we don't want to do that. We just want to stop that.
Right.
And all right, I'll tell you a little bit about the remedy for that. You would talk about the behavior, specifically, like, I noticed again that your socks were left on the floor. We already had a discussion that you were going to pick them up. My request is that you pick them up and put them in the clothes basket. Would that be all right with you to do that? That sounds quite a bit different, right?
Right. Now, I'm sidetracking a little bit, but does this have a little bit of how you were brought up in your former experiences and, as to how you approach those things?
So you're asking how we're brought up. Does that impact how we
Yes.
are in our marriages as adults?
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure. We need to take a break, and we'll be back in just a moment. This is really getting interesting, so we're anxious to get back. Just a moment. Welcome back to Common Cup. I have Benita Esposito, and we're talking about the masters and disasters of marriage,
Right.
and the 4 horsemen, as you referred to, and we're talking about criticism. Would you pick us up now from that point?
Okay, so criticism is the first of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which makes disasters of marriage.
Okay.
The second one is defensiveness. So John Gottman describes defensiveness as, well, the phrase that I often hear is yes but. So one person makes their comment, their statement, and the other partner goes, well, yes but this, and they totally turn the attention on themselves and away from listening to their partner. And they defend themselves, like if they feel like they're being attacked, and it's kind of like putting a wall up. The key about that is that in defending, we're turning away from our partner. We're not creating that bridge. We're not listening to really wanting to know the heart
Right.
of our partner's thoughts and feelings and concerns. So there's a bond that's getting broken there. And that's the essence of that defensiveness. And we can get kind of whiny, or we can attack back. And a lot of times couples get into an attack mode. And if that goes on for a long period of time, it does cause a rift in that bond.
And the next?
The next one, the third one is contempt. And it is the most deadly of all of the four horsemen. We become contemptuous when we take on an attitude that we're better than our partner, we're superior. We like have maybe more power, or we think we should have more authority. We become dominating and condescending, and we become hurtful with our words. We could become hurtful physically as well. And when we don't get our needs met by our partner, we get really hurt. But for a lot of us, saying, my feelings were hurt when you said that, when you did that, would you please say that in a kinder, gentler way and tell me about how you're feeling inside? It's a lot easier for us to protect ourselves when we rise up in anger and then dump on our partner, because we're hurt, we're wounded underneath the anger. But the contempt comes across as being very bitter and very, very hurtful to our partner. So when we take on an air of superiority, well, if you hadn't hurt me, I wouldn't have said that back to you. I wouldn't have pushed you or slapped you or whatever it is. Contempt is never okay in a healthy marriage.
And where do we go from there?
Okay, so the last of the four horsemen is called stonewalling. Okay. So imagine looking at a stone wall. Okay. And that's your partner, how your partner is expressing himself or herself. They're not giving any feedback with their words. They're not giving you any facial expressions or or tell me more, or well, where did you come up with that? They're giving you nothing. Icy silence. And John Gottman's research shows that most of the people who do the stonewalling are males. I think that's very interesting, and John Gottman found that extremely interesting as well. I bet you do too.
Yes, I do. You'll need to take the "you" part out of here. Getting a little too personal. But the point is, again, my question is, where do these patterns come from?
Where do the patterns come? And I do want to get back to stonewalling in a minute. The patterns come from how we grew up, what we saw our parents do, what we see our neighbors do, what we see our teachers and our coaches and everybody else around us do. So we're in kind of this big sea swimming together, and if we don't have healthy modeling around us, we don't know that there is a different way, or that there should be a different way in order to create healthy relationships. And again, this applies to not only marriages, romantic relationships, but any kind of a relationship. Right. Yeah. Friends, parents to children, co-workers.
So these are the disasters.
Right, but let me get back to the stonewalling for a bit.
Okay.
Stonewalling occurs when we get emotionally threatened. And for men in general, because men in our society are taught that you should be strong, you should be tough, you shouldn't let anybody know that you're feeling vulnerable, you shouldn't show it, you shouldn't talk about it because then you're weak. That's the general programming. So men in general and women who grew up to be kind of strong and tough, I took on that programming myself as well. I thought that was the way to be a good girl, and that I would get more strokes from my mom and from my dad if I was that way, rather than whiny and weak and complaining. So I learned to hide my feelings as well, just like the majority of men do. And there are a lot of high-achieving women who've done the same thing. So men are not alone in this by any means. Just wanted to reassure you.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. But when we get emotionally threatened, one of the ways that we can try to protect ourselves is to just don't give any more response. Don't feed the fuel to our partner's avalanche of words that's really getting us overstimulated and overwhelmed. And John Gottman found that the heart rate goes above 100 beats per minute. That creates what he calls flooding. And when that occurs, the part of our brain that we sometimes call the reptilian brain, it's in charge of our survival, and we go into either fighting or fleeing, running, or freezing, just like other animals do. Human beings start to do that as well when we feel flooded, when going to this protective mode, which is just natural for all animals, including human beings. And so when our heart rate gets above 100 beats per minute, the prefrontal cortex, the newest part of the brain that has developed in human beings, it's logical, it's analytical, it can think things through and behave in more appropriate manners to the situation. That part of the brain, the thinking part of the brain, goes offline. It does not work very well at all when the reptilian brain is trying to get us to just survive. So when we're flooded, we will say things that are hurtful or demeaning, that we regret later, that like, what was I thinking? Why did I ever say that? I wish I had never said that. I wish I could take it back. But the harm is already done. So stonewallers think that they're going to be better off if they just don't say anything, don't react. I thought that was a really good idea myself in a lot of my difficulties with relationships. I had no idea how harmful it is. And you know why it's so harmful? Is because in healthy relationships, there is that bonding emotional connection. We call it secure attachment, when we can share back and forth our concerns, our sadness, our fears. We can even share anger, but we do it in a constructive way that's not harmful. So human beings are bonding mammals. We're herd animals. We need each other. We like our secure attachments. And when that attachment is severed, we don't like it one bit. We get scared. We go into what's called primal panic. It's very scary to be cut off from our lovers. And we go into anger sometimes because we're protesting that underlying awful feeling of being cut off from the one that we love the most. And so we figure we should just stonewall instead, because anything else that we do might cause even further severance, and that won't be good. But the stonewalling itself is severing us from that emotional connection. So it's very hurtful.
We need to take another break. This is getting to be very interesting. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Common Cup. I have as my guest Benita Esposito. She is a counselor, licensed professional counselor.
Right.
We're talking about a very special subject about the disaster of marriage, and there is such a thing as the master of marriage. But
Right.
would you just bring us up where we left off?
All right, so we were talking about stonewalling when we get so overwhelmed, and one of our coping mechanisms is just be still and don't give any response at all. And we were talking about how that really severs the emotional connection with our partner. It really hurts a lot.
Yes.
The other thing that John Gottman found, or one of the other things that John Gottman found that destroys marriages, is when we want to bring up a conflict or something that's disturbing to us, and we do it with what he calls a harsh startup.
Okay.
So that's a tone of voice that would trigger our partner, or talking in a loud voice or in an angry way that gets our partner off guard and gets them threatened. So anytime we do start with a harsh startup, the conversation is likely to end the same way it began, and that is also a predictor of divorce. So just some tips that people can take away is, rather than do the harsh startup,
Yes.
do a gentle startup. You can say almost the same content, but say it in a softer, gentler tone of voice, saying it from caring in your heart, wanting to connect with your partner, wanting to say it in a way that your partner is more likely to come toward you rather than back away. So, real important tip there.
Okay.
So, John Gottman also found that happily married couples sometimes do those 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. They're not perfect by any means. Right. We don't have to be perfect to have a happy marriage. Mm-hmm. But what the masters of marriage do when one of the 4 horsemen show up is that they offer an effective repair attempt to get that emotional closeness going again. Right. So it might be just acknowledging, I just criticized you, I just attacked you, I am so sorry, I don't want to do that, please forgive me, can you forgive me? That was the offer of the repair attempt. Now, we also have to make sure that it's received.
Right.
And just because a repair attempt is offered doesn't mean it's going to get received. And so John Gottman found that the couples that actually receive have another important thing going on.
What's that?
They have a solid base of friendship that they've been developing over time, and they've been putting chips in their emotional bank account regularly, turning toward each other every day, having talks and connections. And how was your day, honey? And let me listen. And you know, if that was stressful to you, the partner just listens, validates their emotions. Must have been really rough for you when your boss criticized you and didn't really understand where you were coming from. But that really hurt. Validating emotions, empathizing, being the safe harbor where you can come to for support, comfort, reassurance. So building that solid foundation is absolutely essential.
Okay. And this is a continual thing, all the way through
forever
life.
And ever and ever. And again, what creates healthy marriages creates healthy friendships, healthy work relationships, healthy parent-child relationships.
Let me ask you about, how do you help people in this area?
Help people here in this geographical area,
No,
or in the topic area?
In the topic area, you have workshops and things you planned.
Yeah. I have workshops throughout the year.
And you have something that is current?
Well, the people can go onto my website and see the event schedule, and that changes throughout the years.
I cannot express my gratitude for you being our guest today. It opens up a lot of things, and I surely would like to have you back.
Oh, I would love to come back. We'll talk a lot more about it.
And I'm glad that you joined us too. I'm Jim Gear, host for Common Cup.